Miss Coleman, after Christmas, you probably won't be needing that big West End house anymore. He said it quiet, almost gentle, like he was doing me a kindness. Andre Brooks said those words right in the middle of Christmas Eve dinner, between the clink of somebody's fork and the sound of people laughing across the room, and not one other person at that table caught it, but I did. My name is Naomi Coleman. I am 68 years old. For 43 years, I was Marcus Coleman's wife. Marcus taught high school history. He was a deacon at our church. He was the kind of man who remembered the names of students he hadn't seen in 20 years, who fixed the leaky faucet in the church fellowship hall on a Saturday morning without telling a soul he'd done it, who never went to bed without saying I love you, not even on the nights when we'd been arguing about something small and stubborn, and neither one of us wanted to be the first to let it go. I was the keeper of our home on Oglethorpe Avenue in Atlanta's West End. I made the sweet potato pie. I kept the prayer list. I was the one who showed up, and on Christmas Eve, my own son-in-law sat across a table full of people I barely knew and told me, easy as mentioning the weather, that the house Marcus and I had built our whole life inside wasn't something he expected me to need anymore. He said it like the decision had already been made. What Andre Brooks did not know, what none of them knew when they pulled out their chairs and sat down that night, was that 3 weeks before Christmas, I had gotten a letter from Atlantic Capital Bank telling me that someone new had been added to my retirement account. The name on that letter was Andre Brooks, and I had already called a lawyer. Before we go any further, and I need you to stay with me because what happens inside that house on Christmas Eve is going to shake something loose in you. If this is your first time here, subscribe right now. This is the story of a woman who got quietly counted out by the people she loved most, and what she does about it will stay with you a long time. Let me take you back, not to the betrayal, not yet. Let me take you to a Tuesday morning in early December, 3 weeks before Christmas. The light is coming through the kitchen window on Oglethorpe Avenue the way it always did that time of year, pale and thin, the kind of Georgia winter light that arrives like it isn't sure it's welcome. The kitchen smells like coffee and the ghost of last night's cornbread. The old clock on the wall, the one Marcus hung crooked back in 1987, and I never once straightened because I loved the way he laughed every single time he noticed it, reads 7:42. I'm standing at the counter with my second cup of coffee. Real coffee, not the decaf my cardiologist keeps after me about. The refrigerator hums. Somewhere out on Westview Drive, a garbage truck is making its slow, faithful rounds. On the counter beside the coffee maker is a letter from Atlantic Capital Bank. I've read it 3 times already. It says there's been a change in the designated representative on my retirement account. The account Marcus and I spent 43 years building, dollar by dollar, through lean school year budgets and summers of just trusting that it would work out. The account that was supposed to carry me through whatever years I had left with my dignity still on. The new name listed is Andre Brooks, not my name, not Tiana's, not Darius's, nobody I remember signing anything for. Andre Brooks, my son-in-law. The man who had not once in 11 years of marriage to my daughter called me anything warmer than Ms. Coleman. I set the letter down. I pick up my coffee. I stand real still and look out at the crepe myrtle Marcus planted the year Darius was born. A cardinal's landed on one of the bare branches, red against that flat December gray, sharp and certain. I think about calling Tiana. I think about what Marcus used to say. Naomi, you always want to believe the best of people before the evidence gives you permission. He wasn't wrong about me. Instead, I call Malik Freeman. Malik was Marcus's oldest friend from Morehouse. He's a real estate and estates attorney with an office on Peachtree Street in Midtown, the kind of man who wears wire-rimmed glasses and takes his time with words because he's learned, over a long career, that words are harder to take back than people think. He gave Marcus's eulogy, he held my hand at Westview Cemetery, and when I read him what that letter said, there was a silence on his end that I recognized. It was the silence of a man who's seen enough of people to know exactly what he's looking at. Naomi, he said finally, don't sign one more thing, not one page. Pull every document you have in that house. Deed, will, insurance, all of it, and bring it to me Monday. Malik, I said, and I heard how small my own voice sounded. Do you think my children— I think, he said, careful and steady, that someone may be driving this car while your children are sitting in the passenger seat. And I think you need to know what you're actually dealing with before Christmas comes. I hung up. I stood in the kitchen where I had made 43 years of breakfasts. The cardinal was gone, the morning light had gone flat, the coffee had gone cold, and I opened the drawer beside Marcus's Bible, the one with his handwriting in the margins, the one he read every single morning without fail, and I pulled out every piece of paper I could find and started reading like my freedom might actually depend on understanding what I was holding, because I was beginning to think it might. Before this story goes any further, I need to ask you something real. If you found out that someone close to you had been quietly making plans about your future without ever once asking you, would you confront them right then? Or would you go quiet and start paying attention? Drop your answer in the comments right now. Because what Naomi decides to do next is either going to surprise you or tell you everything about the kind of woman she actually is. What I didn't know yet, sitting in that kitchen on a Tuesday morning in December, was that 3 weeks later, at a Christmas dinner table, a 12-year-old girl was going to say 7 words that would bring the whole thing out into the open. And nothing would ever be the same after that. Let me tell you something about grief that nobody warns you about. It doesn't just take the person. It rearranges everything around the empty space they left. It shows you, in the quiet that follows, who was really beside you all along, and who was only ever standing next to the life you'd built together, waiting to see what would be left when it was over. When Marcus died of a sudden cardiac event at Grady Memorial Hospital on a Thursday afternoon in October, 5 years before that Christmas, I lost the man who was the rhythm of my days. The man who made terrible puns at breakfast and never apologized for a single one. Who drove 45 minutes each way to Decatur on Saturday mornings to bring his elderly Aunt Cora her prescriptions because she shouldn't have to ask twice. Who, whenever I cried at Hallmark movies from the recliner, which I will admit happened with some regularity, would bring me a glass of sweet tea without a word and sit down beside me like it was his own idea. I lost all of that in one Thursday afternoon, but the other loss, the slow, quiet, deniable loss of my children, that one came in pieces, small enough to explain away, small enough that I kept on explaining them away month after month because to stop explaining meant accepting something I was not ready to accept about the people I loved most. Here is something that most people don't understand about emotional neglect inside a family. It almost never announces itself. It doesn't knock on the front door. It comes in small doses, a visit that gets canceled, a conversation that gets redirected, a hug that ends 2 seconds faster than it used to. Each moment, on its own, seems forgivable. Each one has a reasonable excuse. And the person being slowly erased spends an enormous amount of energy convincing herself she's imagining the pattern. Because to name the pattern out loud would mean accepting something unbearable about the people she loves. Naomi Coleman was not a weak woman. She was a woman doing what generations of devoted mothers had been taught to do: absorb, forgive, hold the peace, keep the family whole. The tragedy isn't that she loved too little. It's that she'd been so completely trained to love without limit that she had no language yet for what was being done to her. After Marcus passed, I kept trying to hold everything the way it had been. I called Tiana every Sunday to check if she needed anything. I bought birthday presents for Amani and Amara, wrapped them the way my mother taught me. I kept the house on Oglethorpe Avenue the way Marcus loved it, clean, warm, smelling like something good was always on the stove. I told myself that grief made people pull away, and that pulling away was temporary, and that this family Marcus had poured himself into would eventually find its way back to the table. One Sunday in February, I cooked a full pot of gumbo because Tiana mentioned, somewhere in a phone call, that she might stop by. I spent the better part of the morning on it, Marcus's mother's recipe, the one that needed real patience and a ratio of roux I'd never written down because I carried it in my hands. Tiana showed up at 4:30 with both girls and her coat still on. She stood in the doorway and said, "Mom, can you watch Amara for a couple hours? Andre's waiting in the car." She handed me her daughter. She did not step inside. She did not look at the pot on the stove, did not look at the photograph of Marcus on the hallway wall, the big one in the walnut frame, him laughing at something outside the frame, his whole face lit up with it. She turned and went back down the porch steps. I stood at the door with Amara's small hand in mine and the smell of gumbo coming from the kitchen, and I told myself, she's tired. She has a lot going on. This is just what grief does to people. Then my birthday came in April. Darius drove over from Decatur. Good jacket. Envelope in his hand. When I saw him coming up the walk, I felt something warm and uncomplicated in my chest. My son, remembering. I opened the door. "You didn't have to come all this way, baby." He came inside, set the envelope on the kitchen table. "Mom, I just need you to sign where I marked it. It's a formality." I looked at it. "What is it?" "Just a financial update. Keeps everything organized going forward." I asked if he wanted to stay for tea. I had lemon pound cake on the counter, Mama Turner's recipe from Greater Zion, the one she'd been making for every church event since before Darius was born, the one I'd finally talked out of her after 20 years of trying. He said he was double parked. My son, 39 years old, the boy I'd rocked through ear infections and driven to Little League practice at Mosley Park through Atlanta traffic on 100 different August evenings. Double parked on my birthday. Needed to be somewhere that wasn't his mother's kitchen. I signed the paper. Lord forgive me, I signed it. I was tired in a way that sleep doesn't touch, still learning how to exist in a house that had gone quiet, in all the specific ways a house goes quiet when the person who filled it is gone. And when your child looks at you, even for just a minute, even with a form instead of a hug, something in you reaches for that like it's enough. It wasn't enough. What Darius did that birthday is worth sitting with for a moment because it shows how financial exploitation inside families actually works. He didn't come with threats. He came with a jacket and an envelope and the appearance of a son doing something ordinary. Psychologists call this normalization through familiarity. The exploitation gets wrapped inside the texture of a normal relationship moment so that the target's instincts don't sound the alarm. Naomi wasn't foolish. She was being handled by someone who understood exactly which emotional frequencies to play. And here's the harder truth. Darius almost certainly didn't experience himself as a predator in that moment. He'd probably convinced himself, or let Andre convince him, that this was just a practical matter, that his mother would be fine, that what he was doing was necessary rather than harmful. This is how decent people end up participating in ugly things. Not through malice most of the time, through the slow, comfortable erosion of their own moral clarity. 3 days before Christmas, I called Tiana to ask if I should bring anything for dinner. "Don't worry about it, Mom," she said, and her voice was too smooth, too practiced, the voice of someone who'd already rehearsed the answer. "We've got everything covered." "I was thinking the sweet potato pie, your daddy's recipe." "Honestly, Mom, we're fine. Just come and enjoy yourself." I baked the pie anyway. Bourbon, nutmeg, Marcus's note tucked into the recipe card. More love than butter, Naomi, always. And I wrapped it in foil and told myself I was just a mother bringing something to her daughter's table. I pulled into the driveway on Cascade Road at 6. Nice house, full driveway, lights on in every window. Andre opened the front door. Charcoal suit, the one he wore when he needed to seem serious. He looked at me the way you look at something you've already figured out where to put. "Ms. Coleman," he said. "Not Mom. Never Mom. Just Ms. Coleman. Cool and correct, the way you greet a neighbor you're being polite to on somebody else's behalf." Tiana came from the kitchen with her hostess smile, too bright, too fixed. The kind I'd watched my daughter paste on her face for years when she was performing a feeling she didn't actually have. She took the sweet potato pie from my hands. "I'll put this somewhere safe." My old seat at the main table had somebody in it. One of Andre's colleagues from his investment group, a man I'd never met, telling a story about a golf trip to Hilton Head Island like everyone in the room had been waiting to hear it. My chair. The chair I'd sat in at every holiday at that table since Tiana and Andre bought this house. Someone else was sitting in it now. I found my pie later, on top of the dryer in the laundry room, still in the foil. Set aside like a coat that didn't have a closet. I carried it out myself. Set it on the small folding table near the kitchen entrance. The auxiliary table. The children's table. The table for whatever didn't fit anywhere else. I sat down. Imani came and sat across from me. Amara came and sat right next to me without being asked, the way she always had, since she was old enough to climb up into a chair on her own. She was quieter than usual. She kept watching the room, her father near the kitchen pass-through, her mother moving between guests, with an attention that was too careful, too old for a 9-year-old's face. Then, under the tablecloth, she slid a small folded piece of notebook paper under my napkin. I palmed it without looking down. In the powder room off the front hallway, I read it. Grandma, Daddy said after Christmas someone is coming to measure your rooms. I don't know why. I love you. I folded the paper and held it against my chest for a moment. Then I tucked it inside my blouse and went back to the table. Across the room, near the kitchen pass-through, Andre had pulled Darius aside. They were angled away, voices low under the noise, but I was watching. Once the POA is fully executed, we move fast, Andre said. The buyer wants to close before New Year. She won't fight it if we present a unified family decision. She's 68 and she's alone. She'll do what the family says. Darius said something I couldn't make out. Andre said it again, quieter and more certain. She'll do what the family says. Then Andre's phone lit up on the kitchen counter. Even from where I sat, I could read the notification. West End appraisal. Buyer wants closing before New Year. Andre walked over in 3 quick steps and turned it face down. Then he looked up. Our eyes met across the room. He smiled. Smooth. Practiced. The smile of a man with nothing to worry about. I smiled back, the way my mother taught me. Full face, nothing behind it. I thought of Marcus, the night we sat on the back porch swing, the one that creaked on the left side ever since Darius was 12, the one we always said we'd fix and never once did. And Marcus had taken my hand and said, Naomi, if the Lord calls me home before you, watch yourself. I've seen how they look at this house. I'm afraid that one day they won't see you as their mother anymore. They'll see you as what's standing between them and what they think they're owed. I'd told him he was being dramatic. I'd kissed him on the cheek and gone inside to check on the pie in the oven. I sat at that folding table at my daughter's Christmas dinner, held Marcus's words in my chest alongside Amara's note, and felt something in me go very still. Not grief, not anger. Something quieter and more final than either one. Clarity. They thought my silence was resignation. They thought the woman who'd spent 43 years keeping the peace would keep it here too. Out of habit, out of love, out of all that deep-trained instinct to hold the family together, at any cost, to herself. They had no idea what I'd already started doing. They thought my silence meant I'd given up. But that night, for the first time in 5 years, I went quiet because I was watching every single thing. I've spent my whole life around children. As a mother, as a deacon's wife who ran the Sunday school supply room at our church for 20 years, as the woman on Oglethorpe Avenue whose kitchen door was always open for whatever kid needed somewhere safe to be after school. And I'll tell you something every woman who spent real time around children already knows. Children are not naive. They're honest in ways that adults spend years learning to shut down. They see the thing sitting in the middle of the room that everybody else has agreed to walk around, and they name it, plain as day, cheerful as anything, with no idea what they've just set off. On Christmas Eve on Cascade Road, it was Imani who struck the match. Dessert had been served. The room had that particular feel of a party winding down. Voices a little looser, people settling in, the comfortable blur that makes everyone think they're safe. Andre was at the head of the main table running his performance laugh, the one that showed all his teeth and stopped before it reached his eyes. Tiana was refilling glasses. Darius was staring at his plate like it owed him something. Imani looked up from her dessert with the brightness of a child who's been holding on to an interesting piece of information and has finally found the right moment. "Grandma Naomi," she said, clear as a bell. "After Christmas, when you move to your new place, can you bring the big picture of Grandpa Marcus, the one from your hallway?" The table went quiet. Not all at once. The silence moved through the room like a power outage traveling down a street. The people nearest to us first, then the main table going still as it reached them, until the only sound was the kitchen vent and the slow crack of ice in somebody's glass, and the huge, ringing echo of a question that had asked something nobody was supposed to ask. I set my fork down, slowly, the way you set something down when your hands need to be steady. "What new place, sweetheart?" Imani was still perfectly herself, curious, easy, not yet reading the room. "The place with the nurses and the doctors, where older people go to be safe." She paused, and something in the silence must have finally registered, because she looked uncertain for just a second before she kept going. "Daddy said there are people there who lock the doors at night so the grandmas don't get confused and wander outside." The ice cracked again in someone's glass. In that silence, it sounded like a bell. Let's stop here a moment, because what just happened at that dinner table is one of the most psychologically revealing moments in this whole story, and it's worth really understanding. Imani didn't betray her father out of spite. She spoke because she's 12, and because, in her mind, she was just asking a straightforward question about a grandmother she loves. But the fact that she had that information at all tells us something important about how secrets work inside families doing harmful things. When adults are engaged in something they know is wrong, they rarely maintain airtight silence. They talk, they take phone calls with the door only halfway closed. They have conversations at volumes they believe children can't parse. And children absorb all of it, quietly, without announcement, storing information they don't fully understand but recognize as something that matters. Imani heard Andre describe a facility. She heard the language about locked doors. She stored it, and at the dinner table, surrounded by family, she produced it the most innocent way possible, as a question about her grandfather's photograph. Researchers who study family systems sometimes call this the truth pressure of witnessed secrets. The people inside a conspiracy believe they control the information, but secrets push outward on their own. They find the path of least resistance. And in this family, on this night, that path ran straight through a 12-year-old girl asking about a picture. Tiana was across the room and crouching toward her daughter before I'd drawn a full breath. "Imani, come help me in the kitchen, baby." "But I didn't finish." "Now, Imani," I raised one hand, kept my voice even and warm and completely unmovable. "Let her finish." Tiana stopped. She looked at me, and for just a fraction of a second, something crossed her face that I hadn't expected. Something that looked, if I'm being honest, like relief. Like some small part of her had been waiting a long time for somebody to say stop. Andre was already moving, social smile on, the one built for exactly these moments, the one that said, "Everybody relax, there's nothing here." He came to the edge of the table like a man who has never once doubted that he's the most capable person in any room he walks into. "Miss Coleman, you know how kids are. They catch half a conversation and fill in the rest. Imani just..." "Andre." I didn't raise my voice. Marcus always said the quietest voice in the room is the one that gets heard. I've been a school teacher's wife for 43 years. I know the difference between a child making something up and a child repeating what she heard. He blinked. "Someone locks the doors at night," I said, "so the grandmas don't wander." That's specific. Children don't invent details like that. Somebody said those words out loud in front of my granddaughter. Andre's smile held, but something behind it shifted. "I think we should all just take a breath. Darius." I looked at my son. He hadn't lifted his eyes from his plate since Imani spoke. "Look at me." He did, slowly. The face of a man who'd known for months this moment was coming and had spent every one of those months praying it would arrive when he was somewhere else. "Mom," he said, quiet, "this isn't the time." "No," I agreed, "it's not, which is why I'm going to get some water." I stood, smoothed my blouse, walked to the kitchen at the pace of a woman who has lived 68 years and stopped wasting herself on performances nobody asked for. On the counter beside the refrigerator was a green folder. Andre's green folder. The one he'd carried in under his arm when he arrived. Marcus always said, "Pay attention to what people bring into your house without announcing it." I opened it. Inside, a more complete copy of the power of attorney than anything I'd seen, a printed email chain, a document from a company called Heritage Property Solutions of Georgia, LLC, with my home address at the top, and a summary sheet with a line near the bottom that I will remember as long as I live. Elderly owner unlikely to resist if family presents unified family decision. I was the elderly owner. I was unlikely to resist. There's a term in psychology called objectification, the process by which a person gets reduced in someone else's mind from a full human being to a thing that exists in relation to what it can provide. Andre's email didn't call Naomi a mother, didn't call her a widow, a woman, a person with 43 years of life inside that house. It called her an elderly owner, a category, an obstacle with a predictable profile. This is the final stage of a process that had been building for years, the slow, incremental replacement of Naomi as person with Naomi as asset. It had happened so gradually, so wrapped inside the ordinary texture of family visits and insurance forms and holiday dinners, that even the people running the plan may not have fully seen what they were doing to her. But Naomi saw it now. Standing alone in her daughter's kitchen with a green folder on the counter and party noise coming from the next room. And here is what matters most about this moment. She didn't scream. She didn't break down. She didn't walk back into that dining room with the folder in her hand. She took out her phone and photographed every page. That response, calm, methodical, evidence gathering, is what it looks like when a person's grief finishes and her clarity arrives. Therapists sometimes call this transition moving from victim to agent. Naomi Coleman made that transition standing alone in her daughter's kitchen on Christmas Eve, with a green folder on the counter and the sound of people laughing in the next room. My hands did not shake. I want to say that plainly because it matters. My hands did not shake. Something had settled into me that was past the place where hands shake, something cold and clear and final. The way the air feels after a storm ends and the world goes very still and very clean. I photographed every page, methodically. I replaced the folder at the same angle I'd found it, the same corner showing beneath the edge of Andre's jacket on the counter stool. Then I heard footsteps. Andre filled the kitchen doorway. His eyes went straight to the folder. He registered it, just a fraction, just long enough to clock that it might be a quarter-inch off from where he'd left it. Then he looked at my phone. "Ms. Coleman," he said, careful, "what are you doing in here?" I turned my screen toward him, a blank notes page, nothing on it. "Seeing if anyone wanted pie to take home," I said pleasantly. "Seems like it might go to waste otherwise." That landed on him in a particular way. I watched it land. He looked at the phone. He looked at me. He couldn't be certain what I'd seen, couldn't be certain what I'd done. And a man who can't be certain has already lost a step he won't get back. "That's thoughtful," he said. "I am a thoughtful woman," I said. "Always have been." I spent a long time confusing that with not paying attention. Turns out they were never the same thing. I walked past him. Back in the dining room, I got my coat from the hallway hook. Tiana appeared at my elbow, the hostess composure finally gone, something raw and scared underneath it. "Mom, can we talk? Not tonight, but this week. Can we just talk?" I looked at my daughter, my firstborn, the child I'd labored 14 hours to bring into the world on a hot August morning, the girl who used to fall asleep holding the hem of my dress. I kept my voice soft because she was still my child and always would be, no matter what this Christmas had shown me. Tiana, I said, you needed to come to me. Not to a plan, not to your husband's timeline, to me. I was right here. The door on Oglethorpe Avenue has been open every single day for 5 years. She looked away. The door's still open, I said. But I choose who walks through it now. I went to the small table, bent down, and kissed Imani on the forehead. Thank you for asking about the picture, baby. Your grandfather's photograph goes everywhere I go. Then I bent to Amara, those serious, watchful eyes looking up at me. I leaned close and whispered, Grandma heard you. Grandma knows. You did the right thing. She grabbed my hand, one quick, fierce squeeze, let go. I said goodnight to the room, walked to the front door, and opened it. Behind me, I heard Tiana's voice drop low and urgent. She knows something, Darius. We have to finish the paperwork before Tuesday. We can't let this go any further. The door closed behind me. The cold December air hit my face like something honest. I walked down the porch steps to my car with the evidence on my phone and Amara's note still against my heart, and I drove home to Oglethorpe Avenue through the quiet, dark streets of Southwest Atlanta. I sat down at my kitchen table at midnight with a real cup of coffee and Marcus's photo watching me from the hallway, and I called Malik Freeman and left him a message that was 4 sentences long. They had until Tuesday. It was Saturday night. I had been waiting for this to stop being deniable. It had stopped, and I was ready. They had Tuesday, I had tonight, and I had every page of that green folder on my phone. Monday morning, 8:45. The offices of Freeman Law Group are on the 14th floor of a building on Peachtree Street, Northeast in Midtown Atlanta. On a gray December morning, the windows look out over the city in a way that makes everything below seem orderly and small. Malik had arranged 4 chairs around the conference table, a pitcher of water in the center, one yellow legal pad in front of him. No coffee, no pastries. This was not that kind of meeting. Tiana, Darius, and Andre arrived together. Tiana in her work blazer, put together and precise. Darius looking like a man who hadn't slept in 2 days. Andre in the charcoal suit again, leather portfolio under his arm, the one he carried when he needed to seem like the most serious person in the room. He didn't bring the green folder. I was already seated. I'd arrived 20 minutes early. I'd said good morning to Malik's assistant, accepted a glass of water, and settled into the particular stillness of a woman who has spent a whole weekend moving through the last of her grief and coming out the other side of it into something steadier. I had prayed that morning. Not for victory, not for anything I'd recognize as revenge. I prayed for clarity, for the courage to speak plainly, for the grace to mean every word when I said it. Andre looked around the room, at Malik, at the documents already on the table, at me, and something in his expression made a small, invisible adjustment. The look of a man who has walked into a room that isn't the one he planned for. He sat down, smiled. I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding. Andre, Malik said, with the patience of a man who has heard that sentence more times than he can count. Let's not start there. He opened the first document. In the past 8 months, $43,200 was withdrawn from Naomi Coleman's retirement account using the power of attorney executed in February. He slid the bank statement across the table, then the email chain. Each page set down with the quiet precision of a man who has never needed theater to make a point arrive. That signature was obtained on February 9th, one day, after the 1-year memorial service for Marcus Coleman. He pointed to a highlighted line. In your own email from your business account, you wrote, "She is emotionally vulnerable right now. Best time to finalize. She won't read the fine print." The room was very still. Andre's jaw tightened, but the smile held. Anyone can write anything in an email. That's out of context. The context, Malik said, is in the withdrawal records, which begin 11 days after the signature. 11 days. She signed willingly. Nobody forced her. She's a grown woman. She signed, I said, from my end of the table. the day after she stood at her husband's memorial holding his Bible, while you placed his photograph on her kitchen table and told her that Marcus would want her to be protected. Let's stop here, because this moment isn't just a legal confrontation. It's a collision between two completely different understandings of what happened. Andre's defense, she signed, nobody forced her, reflects a purely transactional view of consent. In his mind, the presence of a signature makes the process legitimate, end of story. But what Naomi and Malik are describing has a precise psychological name: undue influence. It happens when someone in a position of trust, a family member, someone with access, deliberately chooses a vulnerable moment to obtain an agreement that wouldn't have been given otherwise. The signature is real, the consent isn't. And the most effective form of undue influence is the kind that dresses itself up as love, setting a dead husband's photograph on a table, invoking his name, saying Marcus would want you to be protected. Andre didn't walk into Naomi's kitchen with a weapon. He walked in with a picture frame, a stack of papers, and the most effective tool a manipulator carries: the language of care. That's what makes this kind of thing so hard to see while it's happening, and so devastating to survive. The person being hurt can't always name exactly what was done to them, because what was done to them looked like family. That landed differently than anything else in the room. I watched it move across the table. Andre shifted. Tiana was part of every decision. Ask her. She's the daughter. She has standing. Tiana made a sound, barely audible, involuntary. But everyone in that room heard it. She sat very still, both hands flat on the table, looking at a point just past Malik's shoulder. Then she closed her eyes. When she opened them, she was looking at me, and everything she'd been holding up for years had finally come down. Mom. Not composed, not professional, the voice of a woman who has been carrying something too heavy for too long and has put it down at last. I knew, she said. I'm not going to sit here and tell you I didn't know what the power of attorney was for. I knew. I was the one who told Andre which drawer you kept your papers in. I told him you kept everything next to Daddy's Bible in the kitchen. She stopped, swallowed, kept going. I gave him a copy of your house key. I told him you wouldn't fight it, that you always put the family first, that was just who you were. Her voice was breaking, but she kept talking. After Daddy died, everyone kept saying how strong you were. Every person at church, every neighbor, everyone at his school. Naomi is so strong. Naomi will be just fine. And I was drowning. I was drowning in the mortgage and Andre's debts and my own grief that nobody was putting a name to. And I hated that everyone could see you standing while they couldn't see me going under. So I told myself you had the house, you had the retirement, you'd be okay. I turned your strength into my excuse. She looked straight at me. I used the best thing about you against you, and I knew I was doing it. What Tiana confesses in that room is one of the most psychologically honest moments in this whole story, and one of the most uncomfortable. Because most people, if they're being truthful, can find some version of her logic somewhere inside themselves. She didn't hate her mother. That's the essential point. She loved her. But she also resented her. Resented the way Naomi's visible strength seemed to make Tiana's private collapse invisible to everyone around her. Resented that the world kept admiring Naomi for enduring, while nobody seemed to notice that Tiana wasn't enduring at all. Family therapists see this pattern regularly. A child who watches a parent absorb everything without complaint grows up without any model for asking for help. They've been taught, by example, that the way love works is through silent sacrifice. And when their own life becomes unmanageable, they don't know how to say, I'm struggling. They only know how to find a way to take. Tiana's jealousy of her mother's strength wasn't small or petty. It was the accumulated weight of a grief she'd never been given permission to name. That doesn't make what she did acceptable, but it makes it human, and understanding it, Really understanding it, not excusing it, is the only ground where any real repair can grow. Andre felt none of this. He wasn't motivated by grief or love or any complicated tangle of family feeling. He was motivated by debt and calculation. He found a woman who'd been trained by a lifetime of devotion to put other people before herself, and he built a plan around that training. In a very precise sense, he didn't exploit Naomi's weakness. He exploited her virtue. Nobody spoke. Andre said sharply, "Tiana, stop talking." She turned and looked at him. Just looked. Then she looked away and kept going. "I'm sorry, Mom. I don't think I deserve your forgiveness right now. I'm not asking for it. I just needed to say it out loud in a room with witnesses because I've been saying it to myself for months, and it wasn't enough." Malik let the silence hold. Then he picked up his phone, pressed play on a saved voicemail, and set it in the middle of the table. The voice that came through was small and earnest and completely clear. "Hi, my name is Amara Brooks. I'm 9. I got this number from the paper in my grandma's Bible when she let me look at it. I don't know if I'm supposed to call, but I'm calling because I think something bad is going to happen to my grandma and she doesn't know. And I think a lawyer should know. She didn't do anything wrong. She's just my grandma, and I love her. That's all." The recording ended. I put my hand over my mouth. Malik looked at me. "She called 3 weeks ago, same week you came to see me. I wanted you to hear it here, in this room." A 9-year-old child had found a phone number in her grandmother's Bible and called a stranger's law office because she loved me, and because she knew, without anyone teaching her, without a legal framework, without adult guidance, that something wrong was being done. While every grown person in her family had looked the other way, Amara Brooks had looked straight at the truth and refused to pretend she didn't see it. Darius covered his face. Andre leaned forward, the composure gone now, replaced by the tight, cornered energy of a man running out of doors. "All right, mistakes were made, but you can't take this to court without tearing this family apart. You want Marcus's grandchildren watching their parents in a courtroom? Is that what you want his legacy to be?" I looked at Andre Brooks and I took my time. "Andre," I said, "my husband spent 40 years in classrooms on Joseph E. Lowry Boulevard telling young Black men and women that who you are when nobody's watching is who you actually are. He taught that in every class he stood in front of, in every Sunday school lesson, at every kitchen table, in every house this family ever sat around. And you have spent the past year using his name, his memory, his photograph to take apart what he left behind. So when you ask me whether I want to use his grandchildren as a reason to stay quiet, understand that you are asking the wrong woman." He opened his mouth. I wasn't done. "You wanted to sell my house. You had an appraisal, a buyer, a closing date." I reached into my bag and put a document on the table. "I already sold it." Nobody moved. 3 weeks ago, with Malik's help, I transferred the property on Oglethorpe Avenue into the Marcus Coleman Education Trust, a nonprofit under Georgia state law. The house is going to be a tutoring center and college preparation program for West End students. Free of charge, after school, college application help, a hot meal 4 nights a week. I looked at Tiana. I looked at Darius. "You wanted to turn your father's house into money. I turned it into what your father spent his whole life working toward. Children who look like him, sitting at tables in the house where he lived, being told they have a future worth preparing for." Darius was crying. Not quietly, not with any effort at composure. Openly. The way a man cries when he's finally been made to see the full distance between who he meant to be and who he actually became. "I turned Mama's stability into an excuse for my own cowardice," he said. "I knew it was wrong every single day. I told myself that if Mama was okay, then what we were doing wasn't that bad. I made her being okay into permission." I placed the final document on the table. My revised estate plan. All remaining assets go to the trust. Andre has no role, no access, no standing, now or ever. Tiana and Darius may, with time and real honesty and real accountability, rebuild something with me, on terms I define. And Amara, I paused. Amara will have a named scholarship at 18 if she pursues education in service of community. Because a 9-year-old girl who calls a law office to protect her grandmother deserves to know that courage gets noticed and that goodness has its own inheritance. I picked up my bag. Malik will handle the rest. I stood, buttoned my coat, and walked to the door of that conference room, 14 floors above Peachtree Street, while the city moved on below and the December sky over Atlanta was the clean, pale gray of a morning after something hard and necessary has finally been said. And that was the last time I sat across a table from people who believed my silence meant I had nothing left to say. Savannah, Georgia after Christmas isn't the Savannah from the pictures. It isn't Spanish moss catching golden hour and River Street cobblestones shining for a camera. It's gray skies and quiet streets and the smell of the river on a wind that feels older than you. It's a city that's seen too much history to be startled by anything, and it takes in people who arrive carrying their own history with a kind of unhurried patience I found in those first weeks to be exactly what I needed. I'd found a rental near Victory Drive, 2 bedrooms, a kitchen with good morning light, and a back porch looking out toward live oaks so old they'd long since stopped needing anyone's approval. The floors had their own opinions, creaking in 3 specific spots I memorized inside the first week and navigated around by instinct, the way you navigate around a house that's already decided who it is. My neighbor to the left was Ruth Halliday, 71 years old, retired from 30 years of nursing at Memorial Health, from Macon originally, who knocked on my door the second day with lemon pound cake and the kind of conversational instincts you develop after decades of sitting at bedsides. The understanding that the best thing you can do for someone arriving somewhere new is show up with something sweet and no expectations attached. "You're the new one," she said. "I am," I said. She looked at me the way someone looks at a person when they're reading them quickly and accurately. Running toward or away? I thought about it honestly. I think I'm finally running even. She nodded like that was the most sensible thing she'd heard in some time and handed me the cake. There's something worth noting about what Naomi does in Savannah, because it would have been easy and understandable for her to arrive in that city and simply rest. To take the relief of having gotten out and call it healing, to put up walls and call them boundaries. But what she actually does is more precise and more difficult than that. She doesn't define herself by what was done to her, or by the family she left behind, or even primarily by Marcus. She goes looking for the version of herself that existed before she became anyone's wife, anyone's mother, anyone's keeper, the original Naomi. And she starts learning, slowly, what that woman actually likes, what she finds interesting, what makes her laugh, what she wants her days to feel like. This is the under-acknowledged work of recovering from emotional exploitation, not just healing the wound, but remembering the person who existed before the wound became the center of the story. I didn't bring everything from Atlanta. Some things I gave away. Some things went to families at Greater Zion who could use them. I didn't bring the dining room table. I bought a new one, round, 4 chairs, from a furniture store on Abercorn Street. Small enough that whoever sat at it was always close. No head, no hierarchy, no main seat, and no folding table near the kitchen for whoever didn't quite fit. Just a table where everyone was equally arrived. I hung Marcus's photograph in the kitchen, the big one in the walnut frame, where I'd see it every morning coming downstairs. Not because I was hiding from his memory, but because I was carrying it forward into a life he would have recognized as mine. I found a Baptist congregation on Waters Avenue within the first week. I wasn't looking for a community. The community found me, the way it does when you show up and mean it. Christmas in Savannah, my first one. I cooked for 2 days. The sweet potato pie, the real one, bourbon and nutmeg, and Marcus's note folded into the recipe card. collard greens the slow way, roast chicken with rosemary and lemon, cornbread in the cast iron skillet that had been to 4 addresses with me and was my most reliable possession. Sweet tea that Ruth later called the finest she'd had since her mother was alive, which I received as one of the great compliments of my life. Ruth came with her sister Elaine from Columbia, South Carolina. From my new church came Celestine, 74, 2 late husbands, still wearing her good pearl earrings to every Sunday service without exception, because she said a woman owed it to herself to look like she meant to be here. Dorothy, 66, just retired from the Chatham County school system, who had the laugh of a woman who'd been waiting her whole working life to have real time for one. And James Earl Freeman, no relation to Malik, 67, widower, Vietnam veteran, the kind of man who'd become the honorary grandfather of half the neighborhood through nothing but showing up consistently, who arrived at my door carrying a sweet potato pie of his own. "Competition," he announced, presenting it with full ceremony. "May the best woman win," I said. My pie was better. James Earl conceded with a dignity Marcus would have appreciated. There were also 3 children from the neighborhood, kids Ruth had been keeping an eye on for years, whose parents worked hours that left gaps in the evening, who showed up at her porch for homework help most nights. They came to my table in their good clothes and ate 2 full plates each, and called me Miss Naomi without being told, because Ruth had raised them with manners and they'd held on to them. One of them was a boy of about 10 named Calvin, who reminded me, in some way I couldn't quite pin down, of Marcus at that age. Not the face. Marcus's face was entirely his own. Something in the way Calvin sat, the attentiveness, the way he listened when somebody spoke, like he already understood that listening was its own form of respect. Near the end of the meal, he asked if I'd teach him to make the pie sometime, because he wanted to learn to cook. "Come by Saturday," I said. "Yes, ma'am," he said. Those 2 words, given freely, without prompting, by a child who barely knew me and had simply decided, on the evidence of 1 meal, that I was worth that. I slipped into the kitchen for a moment, just stood at the counter and let myself feel the full weight of the evening. Voices from the next room, laughter, Elaine and Ruth going back and forth about something small, the smell of the cornbread still holding. At a house on Cascade Road in Atlanta, I'd sat at a folding table near the kitchen with my pie on the dryer and my chair occupied by a stranger, and the words Ms. Coleman in the air like a wall. Here, I sat in the center of my own table. Nobody had taken my seat. Nobody had spoken for me or over me or around me. I wasn't the overflow. I wasn't the auxiliary. I wasn't the elderly owner unlikely to resist. I was Naomi, the woman who made the best pie at the table, and the table was mine. My phone lit up during dessert. I slipped into the kitchen to read in private. Tiana: "Merry Christmas, Mom. I'm in therapy. Twice a week. I told the girls the truth. Not everything, but what was right for their ages. That I made choices I'm not proud of, and that I hurt you, and that I'm working on being better." Amara cried. She asked if you were okay. I told her you were more than okay. I hope that's still true. I'm trying. Darius: "Mom, I've cut all financial ties with Andre. I've started repaying my portion. I know that doesn't fix it. I just want you to know that the son you raised is still in here somewhere, trying to find his way back to you." I stood at the counter in Savannah and read both messages twice. Then I typed back, same words to both. "I love you. I will always love you. But love without respect is just a habit, and I've broken that habit now. When you're ready to come to me with honesty and real accountability, not to earn something back, not as a performance, but as the basic requirement of being in each other's lives with dignity, I'll be here. The door's not locked, but I choose who turns the handle." I sent it, then I went back to my table and poured James Earl another glass of sweet tea and let the evening finish on its own time. A few days later, Malik called to tell me Andre had signed the restitution agreement. Full repayment of $43,200, structured penalties for any missed payment, and if he defaulted once, the file moved forward through official channels with no further warnings and no further conversations. I didn't celebrate. I felt something cleaner than celebration. The particular quiet of a woman who has spent months carrying weight that was never hers and has finally, legally, completely set it down. And then Amara came to Savannah. And I understood something about inheritance that no document can hold. Amara arrived on a Friday afternoon in early January in the back seat of Tiana's car. Tiana parked at the curb and stayed. She understood, without my having to say it, that this visit was between her daughter and me. It was the first genuinely generous thing Tiana had done in longer than I could easily remember. Sitting in the driver's seat with the engine running and letting her 9-year-old daughter walk up my porch steps alone. Amara didn't slow down at the porch. She came up the steps at a run and went straight into my arms without breaking stride, the way children move toward people they're absolutely certain of. I held her a long time with my face pressed against the top of her head and her arms locked around my waist, and neither one of us said anything for a while, because some things need to be felt before they can be spoken. She smelled like the orange lotion Tiana always used on the girl's hair, and underneath it, like a child who'd been carrying a worry for months and was only now, in this moment, letting it go. "Are you okay, Grandma Naomi?" "I am, baby," I said. "Are you?" She pulled back and looked at me with those eyes, careful, attending, older than 9. I was scared when I called that number, the lawyer's number. I didn't know if I was allowed to. Didn't know if it would help or make things worse. "It helped," I said, "more than you know." "Daddy said I shouldn't have done it without asking." I chose my words carefully. "Your daddy is going through a time of learning. You were ahead of him. That happens sometimes, even with grown-ups." She sat with that for a moment. "I'm still on Daddy's side," she said. "I love Daddy, but I was on your side first. Is that okay to be both?" "Amara," I said, "that is one of the wisest things I've heard anybody say in years, and I've had 68 years of people saying things." She almost smiled. "How many years?" 68. "That's a lot." "It is. Come inside. I made something." What Amara says at that kitchen table in Savannah, "I was on your side first," is a statement of moral clarity that most adults spend a lifetime failing to develop. She doesn't frame her loyalty to her grandmother as a rejection of her father. She holds both loves at the same time without pretending one erases the other. She loves Darius, and she refused to participate in what was being done in his name. That capacity, to love someone and still refuse complicity in the harm they're doing, is something most people in Tiana and Darius's position never find. They tell themselves that loyalty to the family means silence, that protecting the people they live with means looking away. Amara, at 9, understood something they hadn't yet learned, that real love sometimes means bearing witness to what's true, even when the truth is frightening, even when you don't fully understand what you're about to set in motion. She made that call without knowing if it would matter. She made it because something in her wouldn't let her stay quiet. And that instinct, that moral refusal, is the most important thing Naomi will ever give her. Not the scholarship, not the trust. That instinct. We sat at the round kitchen table and she ate 2 slices of sweet potato pie before she was willing to stop. And I told her about the Marcus Coleman Education Trust, about the house on Oglethorpe Avenue, about the reading room where Marcus's armchair used to be, and the brass plaque in the entryway with his name and the words he'd lived by. I told her about the scholarship, her name on it, hers at 18 if she chose it, with one condition, that she use whatever she built to serve somebody beyond herself. Amara shook her head slowly when I finished. "I don't want it because people feel bad," she said. "I want it if I earned it." I took her hand across the table. "That," I said, "is exactly why I chose you, and you're already earning it, one honest thing at a time." She thought about that. Then she nodded, just once, quietly, and I recognized that nod. It was the nod of someone making a private agreement with themselves about who they intend to become. I knew it because I'd made one just like it, standing in a kitchen on Oglethorpe Avenue in early December, with a letter from a bank on the counter and a cardinal on the bare branch outside. After Amara went to sleep in the small guest room, I stepped out onto the back porch. The Savannah River was just visible in the distance, a dark ribbon under the far lights of the city, moving the way rivers move, without drama, without announcement, simply going where they go because that's what rivers do. The live oaks stood in the dark like something permanent. Down the street, a wind chime turned in a small night breeze. I stood there with both hands around a mug of chamomile tea, and I talked to Marcus the way I'd been talking to him since October, 5 years ago. Quiet, private, the way you talk to someone who isn't in the room anymore, but is still somehow entirely present. You were right, I told him. You saw it before I could. And I'm not angry at myself for not seeing it sooner, because those years I spent believing the best about our children, that wasn't foolishness, Marcus. That was love. It just needed to learn where its edges were. I looked out at the river. I'm okay. I'm okay on my own terms, which turns out to be something I didn't know I was capable of until I had to find out. The house is what you would have made it. Amara is what we always prayed for, the one who comes after, who breaks the pattern, who chooses differently. She's 9 years old, and she's already more honest than most people manage in a whole lifetime. I set the mug down on the porch rail. The table at that Christmas dinner wasn't where I was supposed to be. I know that now. I spent years sitting at the wrong table, grateful for the chair while other people decided whether to leave it there. I'm done with that. I have my own table now. Round, so nobody sits at the head. 4 chairs, enough room for the people who show up with something real. I went inside, locked the back door, washed the mugs, turned off the kitchen light, and went upstairs to bed, in my own house, in a city that was becoming mine. And I slept the deep, uncomplicated sleep of a woman who has said what needed to be said and done what needed to be done, and is no longer waiting for anyone's permission to live her own life all the way. Let me tell you what the months after looked like. In January, I enrolled in a watercolor class at the Savannah College of Art and Design's community program on Abercorn Street. My first attempts were, I'll tell you honestly, remarkable only for their confidence. Abstract in ways I hadn't planned. Colors placed with what my instructor Claudette, patient, kind, the kind of teacher Marcus would have recognized, called fearless commitment. I took it as the compliment she intended and kept going. By March, I'd painted something I was genuinely proud of. The view from my back porch at 7 in the morning, the live oaks in the mist, the light that arrives like it's asking permission to stay. It hangs in my kitchen now, beside Marcus's photograph. In February, I started walking in the mornings. Not for the cardiologist, though he was pleased, for myself. Through Forsyth Park, where the fountain runs all year and the magnolias hold their shape with a permanent, unargued-with dignity. Along the Victorian district streets. Down to the riverfront on clear mornings, watching the container ships move through the water with a slow, certain authority that felt, on the good days, like the world reminding me that large things are still in motion, and I am still among them. In March, I joined the book club at my church on Waters Avenue. We met every third Thursday. We discussed the books for maybe 40% of the time and spent the other 60% on everything else. Marriage, loss, children, faith, what it's actually like to be a Black woman in America at a stage of life the broader world tends to render invisible. These were women who had seen things. They spoke plainly. They laughed easily. They didn't need anything from me except to show up. I showed up. I meant it. In April, Tiana came to Savannah alone. She sat on my back porch in the afternoon and told me about therapy, about the things her counselor, a Black woman in Buckhead with a gift for difficult truths delivered without cruelty, had helped her start to understand, about the long work of separating grief from resentment and learning to speak honestly to both. She said I used your strength as a reason not to build my own. And when I didn't have your strength and didn't know how to ask for help, I went looking for an exit. I listened. I didn't rush past the hard parts to get to the comfort. I think Marcus and I shielded you from the machinery of things, I said finally. You saw us standing. You never saw us learning how to stand. And when the standing was yours to do, you didn't know the first move. That doesn't excuse what I did. No, it doesn't. But it explains some of what went wrong. And understanding what went wrong is the only place repair can actually start. We sat with that in the afternoon quiet, river just past the live oaks, a neighbor's dog making its purposeful way down the sidewalk. Ruth next door pretending not to be curious, which was its own small kindness. I told Tiana what I needed going forward, not as punishment, not as a condition for being loved, just the honest terms of what I was willing to have in my life. I need you to come because you want to, not out of guilt, not because of obligation, not as a performance of repair. Come with honesty and real accountability as the baseline, as the simple minimum of being in each other's lives with dignity, and I'm here. But if I ever feel like I'm being managed again, I'll tell you once, clearly, and then I'll step back without apology and without guilt. She didn't argue. She didn't negotiate. She nodded. That was new. In October, the Marcus Coleman Education Trust opened the house on Oglethorpe Avenue. Malik sent photographs. The front room where Marcus's armchair used to face the television on Sunday evenings was now a reading room lined with bookshelves. The kitchen where I had cooked 10,000 meals was a serving area, warm and bright, where volunteers prepared hot dinners 4 nights a week for students who came for tutoring. In the entryway, where the coat hook still had the same small dents from 40 years of children's backpacks, hung Marcus's photograph, the duplicate I'd made before I left, and below it a small brass plaque. Marcus Coleman, educator, deacon, father. He taught us that learning is an act of liberation. 11 students came the first Saturday. By the end of October, there were 43. I stood in my Savannah kitchen with those photographs on my phone and the morning light coming through the window and a real cup of coffee in my hand. And I talked to Marcus one last time about all of it. 43, I said. 43 students sitting at tables in your house on a Saturday, being told they matter and that they have somewhere to go. That's your life, Marcus. That's what 40 years of teaching looks like when it finally finds its full form. I smiled. We did it. It just took a longer road than we planned, and the road went through some places that were very hard to walk. But I walked them, and I am on the other side, and I am still standing. I set down the coffee and stood at my kitchen window in Savannah, Georgia, with the live oaks and the morning and a cup of good coffee and the quiet, steady sense of a woman who has finally come home to herself. Sometimes leaving the table where you're invisible is the only way to find the place where somebody calls you by your name. And sometimes people only understand your value after you've locked the old door, walked away, and built a life they no longer have the right to touch. This story teaches us that sacrifice without limits isn't love. It's a slow, unintentional teaching, but it's a teaching that tells the people around us they can take more, demand more, wound more, and still expect forgiveness before the hurt has even been named. Naomi Coleman wasn't made vulnerable by age or by widowhood or by grief. She was put at risk by the belief, trained into her across a lifetime of devotion, that love required her to hold still while other people decided her future. And the moment she stopped holding still, not with bitterness, not with revenge, but with paperwork and prayer and the honest voice of a 9-year-old on a voicemail, she became someone nobody could move without her permission. Age doesn't diminish a woman, it clarifies her. It shows you whose love was real and whose was conditional on what you could provide. The ones who remain when there's nothing left to take, those are your people. Every other relationship is either an invitation to grow or a lesson in what you deserve. Amara Brooks was 9 years old. She picked up a phone and told the truth because she loved her grandmother and because something in her refused to look the other way. That capacity, to love someone and still refuse to participate in harm done in love's name, is the most important thing one generation can pass to the next. Not a house, not a retirement account, that capacity. and it is never too late. That is what this story says from beginning to end, quietly and without apology. It is never too late to take your name back. Never too late to choose your own terms. Never too late to walk out of the room where you've been reduced to a category and back into the life where you are simply, completely, irreducibly yourself. If this story moved you today, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you are the Naomi in somebody else's story, patient and faithful and long overdue for your own chapter, hear this. The door to what comes next is already open. You just have to decide you're worth walking through it.